from the corruption of death, and delivered from the guilt of sin. Your people celebrate and sing to you. The barren woman gives birth to the Theotokos, who nourished our life.
In the name of the Father, and of the Son, and of the Holy Spirit, amen. Holy Saints Constantine and Helen, pray to God for us. Holy Martyr Procopius, pray to God for us. I want to begin by telling my favorite monastic story. Some of you have probably heard it, some haven't. A story of a monk who was really struggling. And his life was just unbearable. You know, we can appreciate that. Some of us feel that way sometimes. And he finally went to God and he said, I can't bear the cross anymore. The cross you've given me is too hard. I can't do it. Please give me another one. And so God in his grace said, okay, I'll let you pick. And he took a monk into a room filled with crosses. Huge room filled with crosses. And there were big crosses. And there were crosses with nails sticking out of them, you know. Heavy oak crosses. And he looked all over the room and he was getting depressed. They're all so big. And then he sees in the corner a little tiny gold cross with precious jewels. And of course he knows that that big one with all the nails was the one God had been having him carry. So he walked immediately away from that. He picked up this little cross and he said, Lord, I'll take this one. And God looked down at him and said, that's the one you have. The marital cross. In this, our last lecture, I want to discuss with you just a little bit, what is this cross? What is the cross that is the marital cross, and how do we carry it? And to help us in answering this, I want to use a presentation by St. Theophan the Recluse, which, if you want to read about it later, it's in his book, Kindling the Divine Spark, chapter 6, called Erecting the Inner Cross. And it's significant to me that this chapter was preached on the Feast of the Elevation of the Cross. Because the fact that the chapter was preached on that feast links it to marriage. Did you know that one of the marital feasts is the elevation of the cross? Because who found the cross? Constantine and Helen. And Constantine and Helen are a significant part of the wedding service itself. In the prayer right before the crowning, the priest prays, let that gladness come upon them which the blessed Helen had when she found the precious cross. And isn't that interesting that the crowning would be linked to the finding of the cross? Because that's what those two people are going to find. And then the closing commemorations, which are very significant. You know, the church never does anything haphazardly. There's meaning to all of these things. And in the closing commemoration, when the priest requests God to have mercy on the couple through the prayers, significantly certain saints are chosen. The holy, glorious, all laudable apostles, we know why. And then comes the mention of the holy, God-crowned kings Constantine and Helen, equal to the apostles. You see, there's this linking between the elevation of the cross and the finding of the cross and our own marriage. So St. Theophan on this feast tries to answer the question, what is the cross? Now he is writing specifically of the monastic cross. And what I want to do is take what he says about the monastic cross and drop those parts that apply to monasticism and bring it over and teach you about the marital cross. And it's interesting because he starts and he says, what we must first understand about the cross is that the Golgotha of this cross is our heart. Our heart is where we must erect this cross. And this means that to make our marriages work, the place to start is me, not you. And I don't know about you, I always fix my marriage by talking about you. Because, you know, if my wife was different, we'd have a great marriage. Especially on those days when she does something to upset me. I always instinctively, and it's so easy to fix the marriage by changing her. Have you ever noticed that? I'm the world's greatest counselor when it comes to my marriage, because she always needs to change and I'll be happy and then everything will be wonderful. And I bet you're great counselors too, because you can fix your spouse one way and the other. And if it doesn't work the first time, you'll come up with a second list of what they need to do to fix it. Whereas what St. Theophan says is no. Start with you. And start with your heart. Because if your heart isn't right, you can change all you want on the outside, and it isn't going to fix your marriage. Because what ruins your marriage is your heart. It's what ruins everything else in your life. It's what's wrong in your heart. For as Jesus reminds us, out of the abundance of the heart, the mouth speaks. So then he says, having decided that we're going to erect this cross in our heart, so we'll pretend the ground here is the heart, right? I didn't draw this, by the way, you can tell. My cross barely looks like a cross. So we had Father Luke Dingman draw a cross that actually looks like a cross. He isolates three parts to the cross. He says, first of all, there's the lower part, which breaks the ground of the heart and implants the cross in it. Then there's the upper part. So you have the lower part and the upper part, and then you have the horizontal part. Okay, so he says there's three parts to this cross. The lower part that goes into the ground, the upper part, and then the horizontal part. He labels the lower part as self-denial. The upper part he labels as patience. The horizontal part he labors as obedience. Three parts to the cross: self-denial, patience, and obedience. This is the marital cross. To carry the marital cross is to constantly practice self-denial. Now, I've already mentioned to you the words of Jesus where he says, if anyone would come after me, let him deny himself daily, take up his cross, and follow me. Now, I had always read that, and one of the things I'm hoping that I'm doing for you without doing it for you publicly, and now I'm going to do it for you publicly, is I'm helping you to take your marriage and think about your marriage within the context of your spirituality. Because most of us divorced our life from our spirituality. You know, the spiritual things are the things we do in church by ourselves. And then we go out and we live in the world. What I want to show you, because when we hear Jesus saying, deny yourself, what do you instinctively think of? You think of that steak you wanted to have last Friday night, right? Okay, and there's nothing wrong with that. That is self-denial. But self-denial also applies to the movie she wanted to watch at 6 p.m. Monday evening. When the 49ers were playing, right? That's self-denial. And that makes a steak seem easy. St. Dorotheus of Gaza says, and I remember when I read this, I picked up this book, and after I read it, I regretted picking it up. You ever pick up a book, it's so good you hate it, you know? It's so good. I picked up, he has this big thing, St. Dorotheus of Gaza, 6th century ascetic, and he's wonderful. You should read him. He's the guy who always fell asleep and slept through church. So everybody loves him, you know, because he missed church so many times because he was such a heavy sleeper. He used to pay people to come wake him up. He did. He had 2 people. It wasn't just enough for one monk to do it. He had to pay 2 monks. One to get him, and then he'd fall back to sleep, and the other monk would get him. Our kind of guy, right? And he wrote, self-indulgence is the root of all vice. And then he goes on to say, let us learn to cut off our desires, for nothing helps man so much as to cut off self-will, for thereby a man prepares the way for nearly all the virtues. Self-indulgence is the root of your problems. And then he comes up with this really great idea. He says, you know what? It's really hard to deny yourself. It takes a lot of work. So what I want you guys to do is start practicing it all the time. And he comes up with these neat suggestions. He says, your thoughts say to you, go over there and see what's there. Don't go. Your thought comes to you, I wonder what my wife is cooking for dinner. Don't ask. Your thought comes to you, I'm sort of making it contemporary. Your thought comes to you, I want some ice cream tonight. Don't eat it. Just practice random acts of self-denial. I'm coming up with great slogans, aren't I? Look at that. You guys are going to have bumper stickers all over the place. Be a martyr, get married, practice random acts of self-denial, and then they'll commit you, you know? But he says if you practice this, now he's writing in a monastic setting, but he says if you practice this, he says you will come in a matter of time to make a habit of self-denial, and you will find self-denial is easy, and if you find self-denial is easy, you will find the kingdom and you will find all virtue. So he says start with the little things, just denying yourself. And over time, you will accustom yourself to a life of self-denial, and you will find that everything God requires of you will be easy. And to do what God wants will no longer be self-denial, it will be your joy. And isn't that what we all want? To come to Lent and go, yes. I'm not there yet, you know? I come to Lent and go, oh, you know? 40 days and counting, you know? It's interesting, as an aside, there's a wonderful story of a man who went to visit a monk in Finland, and he said, what is the key to spiritual maturity? And he says the key to spiritual maturity is to accept whatever comes today and be happy with it without looking for tomorrow. And he says, I bet, it was during Lent, and he says, I bet you can't wait for Pascha. And the guy says, yeah, I can't wait. He says, I don't care. Today is Lent. This is God's will for me today. I'm happy. When Pascha comes, I'll rejoice in Pascha because it'll be God's will for me then. But I don't spend my life wanting and wishing. I accept. That's spiritual maturity. That's self-denial. And St. Dorotheus says you don't get there, you know. You don't get to the point where you enjoy Lent by waiting for Lent to come around. You do it by practicing random acts of self-denial. And I start to think, you know what? That's marriage. Marriage is wonderful because there are thousands of ways to practice random acts of self-denial in marriage. I mean, this is it. Every day I get chances of denying myself. Let me give you an example. I know it's going to happen tomorrow, so I'm priming myself for tomorrow. Sunday afternoon, I am always beat and tired, absolutely exhausted. All I want is a glass of water in the left hand, a chair somewhere else, and quiet. My wife is bored to tears on Sunday afternoon. I don't know why. It just, every Sunday she sits there, I sit down to relax, and she gives me that look that says, what are we doing? Because I can't stand to be in this house anymore. Because I've been in this house with 4 kids all week, and I want to get out. And I'm sitting down going, I don't want to see anybody. I don't want to go anywhere. I want to relax, right? Every Sunday, it's the same thing. And tomorrow, it's even worse because my in-laws are in, and she wants to go to San Francisco. Yeah. What a perfect opportunity to deny myself. and to find my salvation and to say, what would you like to do? Where would you like to go? You see, it's perfect. God made opportunity to find salvation on a Sunday afternoon when I'm beaten, tired, and I want to relax. And of course, this is but one of many. Self-denial in your marriage can be as simple as watching her movie instead of your football game. Or it can be as major as not pushing for sex when you know that she is tired. And that's big-time self-denial. It can be as simple as getting up to get her something to drink instead of wanting her to get up and get you something to drink. And can be as major as not saying that comment about her mother when she drives you crazy again. Just controlling, self-denial. You know, we do that in marriage. We say those little comments all the time. They do. You know those ones, right? Your spouse does something that drives you crazy, and if you've been married at any time, you don't have to go into a long thing. You have to say like 3 words, and they hear that long lecture you used to give. That's why married people can talk to each other in such a short period of time. And it is and then, there are some times when in marriage, God just gives you zingers, you can just give them and bam, they're right there. Actually, God doesn't give them to you, Satan does. So it is really hard to practice self-denial and not say, I told you so. I knew that was going to happen. See, if you had listened to me, right? I could have told you if you had asked, right? Self-denial. It can be as simple as cooking his favorite meal, or it can be as major as picking up his clothes, which he left on the floor again without complaining. Each one of these moments is a salvific moment. A moment in which I can find salvation by denying myself. A moment in which I can cut off my own will, and I can deny myself, and I can follow after Christ. That's what it means for me to follow after Christ, is to deny myself and serve my wife. And we get these wonderfully, idealistic, I just wish I could go as a missionary and be butchered by the cannibals, right? Wouldn't that be wonderful? But I can't do that, so would you give me something to drink? That's how we do it. That's how we live. Instead of saying, getting yourself something to drink, let alone her something to drink, that's being butchered by the cannibals for you. And forget these highfalutin ideas of doing something big for God, because that was the way we used to think. Now we're Orthodox. We do little things for God all the time. And that counts as a big thing. Deny yourself. There's an interesting troparion to the venerable ones that we sing. In you, O Mother, or in you, O Father, is restored the image of God. For you carried your cross and followed Christ. You taught by your deeds how to spurn the body, for it passes away, and how to value the soul, for it never shall die. Wherefore your soul is forever in happiness with the angels. That's a troparion for married saints. I made it so it doesn't count. Don't go singing it tomorrow. But that's exactly what marriage gives us the opportunity. How to deny our bodies by serving each other, so that our soul may forever be in happiness with the angels. So to carry the marital cross is to practice self-denial. Anyone who's married not know what this means? Is there anybody here who can't think of one example when you could do this? Anybody? Because if you're not, I'll spend some time with you. Actually, I'll spend some time with your spouse. They'd help me a lot. All right? I think we understand that one, all right? Secondly, St. Theophan says, to carry the marital cross is to practice patience. St. Theophan defines patience as a firmness to stand in your intention, so that no obstacles, discontentment, or labors can make you waver. It's a firmness to do what you have set out to do, regardless of how many obstacles there are, regardless of how tired you are and regardless of how much work it is. That's patience. Now, if you're familiar at all with the writings of the spiritual fathers, you know how important this concept of patience is in their counsels. Over and over again, if you read the monastic literature, you'll find they tell monks, stay where you are. How many times have you read that? Stay where you are. Don't look for a better place. You know, they talk about these monks who go from monastery to monastery finding the best place to be saved. And all the spirits, oh, don't do that. Stay where you are. There is no such thing as a better place for you, because the problem is when you get there, you're there. And it stops being a better place for you, because you're the problem. You know, they always used to say if you found a perfect church, leave because you'd ruin it. Don't look for a more spiritual place, they say. You can be saved right where you are. So plant your feet in cement and don't leave your cell. But know that Satan's going to come and he is going to distract you. Know that Satan is going to come and he's going to tempt you. That's what they say. Know that he's going to discourage you and say it's worthless and you're not making any effort and you need to leave. But don't listen to him. Do not leave your cell. That's what you read, right? Anybody read that over and over again? Well, I would like you today to think of your marriage as your monastic cell. And I have the same exact advice for you. Do not leave your cell. One struggle that almost all married couples go through, if you've been married, is this sense of boredom. You've been married for a while. It's same old, same old. The passion is gone, either because you're too tired or you're too distracted, you know. All of those visions you had for marriage when you got married, you know, that you were going to float off into the sunset, you know, while the music was getting played. You found out that that was a lie because the tape recorder broke and the CD player didn't work, you know, and there's no music. And the sunset is, you're not floating, you know, you're in one of those paddle boats going against the current. You get bored in marriage. And this boredom often turns into bondage. You know, we often joke about the old iron chains. Where did that joke come from? People feel that way. As Orthodox Christians, we must see behind this boredom and behind this sense of bondage the hand of Satan. Because if you read any of the spiritual literature, you know that Satan is very good at creating and enhancing feelings of boredom, bondage, and discouragement. It's the demon of the noonday in the monastic literature, which they say is the most difficult demon of all. And Satan is very good at suggesting exciting alternatives. How many, I mean, it breaks my heart, but, you know, adultery is a real problem in today's world. And I know of so many men who have walked right into the trap of Satan because they weren't thinking. Because it does it every time, you know? A business trip is coming up and you have a big fight with your wife before you leave. Or a business trip is coming up and you get so busy the week before you leave that you don't spend any time together and you feel lonely when you leave. And you're beat and tired when you get where you're going and you meet someone. I know of so many men who have walked right into that because they didn't see the hand of Satan setting up a scenario in which you would consider something that in your right mind you would never consider. That is the work of Satan. And what it will require from us is patience. Patience to endure those difficult times of marriage, which can sometimes last an eternity. At least it seems that way. You know those times when for whatever reason it just isn't clicking. And you're at each other, and the kids have decided that this is their month to drive you crazy, And the bank has decided that this is the month to foreclose. And Satan has decided that this is the month to ruin you, and it's the same month. Patience. There's this wonderful story of a monk who went to his abbot and he said, "I'm out of here." And the abbot said, "Wait a minute, let's just talk about this a little bit." And he said, "Why do you want to leave?" He said, "Listen, Father, I'm a cultured man and I live with a bunch of imbeciles." And the abbot goes, "Well, what do you mean?" He said, "Look, I'm in my cell. They come in and use my things without asking. I go to dinner, they burp. They're slobs. I go to church, I cover my ears. They can't sing, even with the world's greatest choir director. I'm out of here." And the abbot was very wise, and he said to the monk, "Can you give me 3 months?" And the monk said, "All right." And the abbot says to the monk, "Take out a little piece of paper about this big and write on it these words: 'I will endure this for Jesus.' And anytime anything happens that bothers you, anytime they burp at dinner or use your stuff or they can't sing, pull that little piece of paper out and just read it to yourself. Over and over again, 'I will endure this for Jesus.' And come back in 3 months, and if you still want to leave, you'll have my blessing to go." 3 months later, the abbot calls him in and says, "So do you want to leave?" And he says, "Why would I want to leave this wonderful monastery?" And the abbot goes, wait a minute, did they stop coming in your room?" And the monk thinks and he says, "No, you know what? They still come and use my stuff." He says, "Well, did they stop being uncouth at dinner?" And the monk thinks for a minute and says, "You know what? They still do it." He says, "Did they sing any better?" And the monk thinks, "You know what? They don't sing any better. I guess I changed." Because he exercised patience. Wouldn't that be wonderful in our marriages if we adopted that? I will endure this for Jesus. St. Theophan says, this will require the suppression of almost all feeling in endurance. And anybody who's gone through those times know that you have to suppress just about every feeling. You start with anger, right? And then they start rolling. Anger is Satan's. When Satan gets you angry, it's all downhill from there, right? To be patient requires a change in orientation from a feeling-dominated and feeling-directed life. To be patient is to be a martyr. And one of the things, so funny, I tell the stories of the martyrs to the kids all the time, and they almost always know what's going to happen. So now they say, "Did they get beheaded?" When I'm starting, all right, I want to know the end. Did they get beheaded? And I often say yes. He said, "Well, how much did they have to go through first?" Because if you read the lives of the martyrs, there's this pattern. They go through all of these tortures, and they don't die. And in fact, the lives of the saints for today, at the end, if you read the life of the saint for today, they're crying out. The bears come out to kill them, and the bears won't kill them, so they're trying to get the bears to kill them. They're shaking them up, "Come on, come on." And the bears are laying down, and they're kicking them and everything, and the bears won't kill them, and finally they just get beheaded, You read almost all the martyrs are the same. They get this long period of torment, and then they get beheaded and they go to heaven. And I often thought, why don't they just behead them first? It would have been so much easier. But if I have to die, beheading's not a bad way to go. I'm sure it looks bad coming down, but it's over. Right? It's the getting raked, with nails part that drives me crazy. And it's the hanging by my toenails that I wouldn't like. And it's the bear that licks me before it eats me that I wouldn't like. Beheading sounds good after all that stuff. But that's not the way that we become martyrs. Martyrdom requires patience. There was a verse on the glory last night for the saints of today, which really struck me. The verse on the glory said, "As true soldiers of Christ, you renounced the pleasures here below. Taking up your cross, you followed after Christ through manifold torments without denying him before the judges. Thus the angels brought you your rewards as victors. Your heads are crowned and your souls comforted. You joined the great joy of the wedding banquet." And I thought to myself, you know what? This could be sung of those who endure in marriage. As true soldiers of Christ, you renounced the pleasures here below. Taking up your cross, you followed after Christ through manifold torments without denying him before the judges, the watching world. Thus the angels brought you your rewards as victors. Your heads are crowned and your souls comforted. You joined the great joy of the wedding banquet. That's what it's all about. And let me tell you, to stay true to your marriage vows in today's world is to be a martyr. Never has it been easier. Never has it been easier for a person to break his marital vows. I mean, just think about how many options there are. And I'm not just talking about breaking the marriage vows by having adultery. There's other ways to break the marriage vows. To stay true and faithful is to endure, and that's what God calls of us. Thirdly, to carry the marital cross is to practice obedience. And yes, here I am speaking to both husbands and wives. Because before Paul tells wives to submit to their husbands, he tells everyone to submit to everyone else. Verse 21 of Ephesians 5 says, "Submit to one another in the fear of the Lord." And what is obedience? How would you define obedience? Submitting my will to the will of another. Obedience in marriage is saying to your spouse, "Your wish is my command." Now, I'm very good at saying to my spouse, "My wish is your command." That's my usual way of speaking. And I operate on that assumption that that is true, and then I get mad when it's not. Obedience is to look to your spouse and to look for ways of submitting your will to their will. Now, all the fathers agree obedience is necessary for salvation. I must learn how to obey in order to be saved. And your marriage is a perfect place to start. As I was reflecting on this, there was an interesting little article written by Matushka Ann Lardis about this principle of bringing obedience, and it's really quite funny, so I thought I'd share with you and then a couple comments. She says that we need to start obeying. And she said, "I got started on this idea of practicing obedience in little things in my marriage because on a whim I decided to ask my husband what he wanted for supper one Friday instead of just deciding what's good for us. I suggested that I'd cook lentils, which idea he liked, but he said, 'Please, could you not put too many carrots in?' And then she says, 'Cooked carrots are a sort of marital barometer for us. I believe in them, he detests them. I slip them into everything on the grounds that they're good for us and make our eyes stronger. When I'm mad, I put lots of them into everything. When I'm happy, I present the carrots grated and raw the way he likes. One time, when he was 4 hours late getting home and hadn't been able to call, I presented him with a 14-ounce bag of frozen carrots stalled in a fork when he asked about dinner. It was only the crestfallen look on his face as he attempted out of hunger and love to eat them that made me relent and cook a real meal. And so when asked to go easy on the carrots, I thought I had my first real test of the theory. Because there wasn't a carrot in the house. It's not like we hadn't bought any. I had purchased a bag of them the day before, and now I couldn't find it anywhere. And so rather than go shopping so late in the day just to please him, I made the lentils without a single carrot in the pot. I'd not seen Father George that happy in a long time. Such a small thing, I thought, for me to be so stubborn over. As an aside, how about the things you're stubborn over in your marriage? First year of my marriage, my wife and I had a running fight for 7 months over where to put the ketchup. Because my family always put the ketchup in the refrigerator. And her family always put the ketchup out of the refrigerator. And so we just went back and forth, putting the refrigerator where we wanted it, and getting mad when it wasn't there when we wanted to look again, putting the ketchup. I mean, it's true. We fought about that for 7 months, and finally I woke up one day and said, this is stupid. Then she says, the next Sunday, a Saturday, Father George had a baptism but needed some clothing. I love to shop. He hates shopping, so I volunteered to buy it for him and told him about all the places it would be fun to check out, both at the mall and in the new shopping plaza. He said, why don't you go to Walmart? It would be cheaper and you'd find it faster. I didn't want to go to Walmart. I wanted to go to the mall. I didn't want to waste a perfectly good trip to stores on men's clothing. But when I opened the refrigerator looking for a way to formulate my argument, there staring me in the face was the bag of carrots. So I went to Walmart. At the rack of pants next to me, 2 men were speaking. I listened a little harder. They were speaking Russian. So I reached in, got out a card, introduced myself, and told them where the church was. Turns out they're new here with the Russian Space Federation, and we're looking for a church. Coincidence? Maybe, but I'm not betting on it. And so I have a proposal. Married people have an advantage in this, since every spouse has something she or he really doesn't want to do. Think of the things you really don't want to do that would make your spouse so happy. You know, the one that hurts just like when the dentist touches the ice to just the right part of the first tooth and you've diagnosed the problem. We have those things in our marriage, you know. Now, husbands may say that they shouldn't obey their wives, that this isn't what St. Paul said. Granted, St. Paul says that men should love their wives as Christ loves the church. So respond to your wife's request the way you want Christ to answer your prayers, saying yes to what is good for her and no reluctantly to anything that would hurt her. So in other words, make the decision not on the basis of what you want or don't want, but on what's good for her. If it seems that her requests are just a little trivial, look through the book of needs. Don't we pray to God over things that must look trivial to Him? But God, to strengthen our faith and show His love, grants them. And so if you do the things your wife requests, whom are you really obeying? Think about that. Obedience. This then is how we find salvation in our marriages: self-denial, patience, and obedience. Very quickly, you might ask, what kind of marriage is this? This is a real winner, right? Get married, deny yourself, be patient, and obey for the rest of your life. But what we learn if we live this life is that every one of these has a hidden joy. Each one of these virtues, which seems so stern, has an inner side which is alive and joyful. If you can practice self-denial, you will be filled with joy. If you practice patience, you will find developing in you a hope and a heaven orientation that you didn't know was possible. If you practice obedience, you will find developing in you love. The love that endures, which means it's not a love which has its source in this world, but it's a love which has its source in God. In the name of the Father, and of the Son, and of the Holy Spirit.